Alright, so now we are in chapter 1, and what we're going to do is practice some problems from your chapter review found on page 29 in your book. We're going to start by looking at 1.1. So let's look at number 3, and it says, identify the population and the sample. So it reads, a survey of 39 credit cards found that the average annual percentage rate is 12.83%. Well, remember, the population is the collection of all, and the sample is a subset of the population. So in this problem, the population would be the collection of all average annual percentage rates of credit cards, and the sample would be the 39. So the population is the collection of all average annual percentage rates, so APRs, of all credit cards. So I have too many alls. Let's put the here. The collection of the APRs of all credit cards. Keyword is all. And then a sample. In the problem, they said a survey of 39 credit cards. Therefore, your sample included the 39 credit cards. Okay, so now let's move on down to number 5. And it says, determine whether the numerical value describes a parameter or a statistic. So it says the 2009 team payroll of the Philadelphia Phillies was $113,004,046. So we need to know, is it a parameter or a statistic? So recall that a parameter describes a population and a statistic describes a sample. Sample. So when we read the problem, the first thing you want to do is determine if we're talking about a population or if we're talking about a sample. So it says the 2009 team payroll of the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, it's the entire team, therefore it's the collection of all employees for the Philadelphia Phillies. So we are talking about the collection of whole employees, because it's in payroll. Therefore, we must be looking at a population, and our numerical value describes a parameter. Okay, and that numerical value was the $113,004,046. All right, one more. Let's look at number 6. And it says, same instructions. Determine whether the numerical value describes a parameter or a statistic. In a survey of 752 adults in the United States, 42% think there should be a law that prohibits people from talking on their cell phones in public places. All right, well, we see it says in the first part, it says in a survey of 752 adults. So we're talking about a survey, which means it must be a sample. Because you have to think the population will include all adults in the United States. So we're looking at a sample of just 752 of them. Therefore, the numerical value is describing a statistic, and that numerical value is 42%. 42% of the 752. All right, so this includes the 1.1. Let's move over to 1.2. So we're still in our books on page 29. Let's start by looking at number 11. The instructions say, determine which data are qualitative and which data are quantitative. Number 11 reads, the monthly salaries of the employees at an accounting firm. The monthly salary. Well, monthly salary is money. So monthly salary. Salaries. Well, we're talking about money here. Therefore, it has a numerical measurement. Has a numerical measurement, therefore it must be quantitative. All right, let's look at number 14. Same problem. It says determine which data are qualitative and which are quantitative. The zip codes of a sample of 350 customers at a sporting goods store. The zip codes. So now we're looking at zip codes of a sample of 350 customers at a sporting goods store. Well, this is going to be a label, right? So even though a zip code has numbers in it, it really represents a location. It is a label. So it's not going to be quantitative, because quantitative must have a numerical measurement. You know, I cannot add zip codes together. I can't take Sumter zip code and add it to Shaw Air Force Base. It wouldn't make sense. Therefore, this one is qualitative. All right, now let's look at number 17. Instructions say identify the data set level of measurement. Number 17 reads, the daily high temperature for Mojave, Arizona for a week in June are listed. And they list the numbers 93, 91, 86, 94, 103, 104, 103. Okay, and these are temperatures. Great, so we need to figure out what is the data set level of measurement. Well, we're dealing with temperature, and with temperature, you know, you can place the temperatures in order. So there is a low temperature and there is a high temperature. So if we wanted to, we could rearrange these to have the 86 first and the 104 last. So we can put these in order. If we were, so we can place them in order. What else can we say about the temperatures? Well, first of all, temperature cannot be compared to each other. You know, saying it's 50 degrees inside and 100 degrees outside doesn't make sense to say it's twice as hot outside. It's not twice as much heat going to be outside versus here. So it's hard doing a comparison between them. Therefore, this has to be interval level measurement. And the best way to remember that it's interval measurement is to look at temperature. If it has temperature in it, we're going to have a interval. All right, let's look at number 19. Same problem. Now we're going to still identify the data set's level of measurement. And it says the 4 department stores of a printing company are listed. It has administration, sales, production, billing. Well, these do not represent numerical measurements. They're not numbers. Instead, they're kind of labels. They're labeling different departments. And we cannot arrange them in order. Therefore, this is going to be nominal. So this is number 19. And we're looking at nominal. The nominal level of measurement. And again, the reasonings are because the data is qualitative. And you cannot put them in order. So order is not meaningful. Order is not meaningful. And then let me go back to 17. The reason that it is interval level is because I can place the data in order. What am I trying to say? The comparison between data does not make sense. So comparison between, my pen's messing up, two data values doesn't make sense. Can we make it? And again, because we see temperature. Temperature is like a keyword. Okay, so these conclude the problems we'll be doing for 1.2. Let us move over now to 1.3. 1.3. Let's look at number 23. It says, decide which method of data collection you will use to collect data for the survey. A study of how training dogs from animal shelters affect inmates at a prison. So now we want to collect data, and we can remember there's many ways to collect our data. We have a study of how training dogs from an animal shelter affects inmates at a prison. And this one, I think we would be better off performing an experiment. And you can do so by selecting a certain number of dogs as well as inmates at the prison, and they can observe the actual interaction between them. Now, we call it an experiment and not an observation, only because you are actually changing the, how can I say it? You're changing, you're playing in hand and setting up the actual experiment. If you were to go in and just watch, then there'll be an observation. But since you're actually sending in the dogs and you're matching them up with inmates, it is actually an experiment. So we have an experiment. Okay. And then let's go back and look at number 22. And it says, a study of the effect of, what is this? Koalas on the ecosystem of Kangaroo Island, Australia. So the study of the effects of koalas on the ecosystem. Well, this one, you don't actually want to affect the ecosystem in Kangaroo Island, so you're better off performing a simulation. Perform a simulation, because with these, it's like with our crash test dummies. We do not actually want to put real humans in the car and run them into the wall, so we use a simulation. Alright, now let's go down to number 29. The instructions say, identify the sampling technique used in the study. Using random digit dialing, researchers asked 1,003 U.S. adults their plans on working during retirement. So identify the sampling technique. So they're using random digit dialing. So I'm assuming that's a random phone system, like back in the day when you used to get calls from telemarketers all the time. So with this one, it is a simple random sampling is being used because the random telephone numbers were generated. So since it uses the word random and it's running through an entire list and it's just picking out numbers, this is something a system or a computer is doing. We just have a simple random sampling. Great. Alright, now let's look at number 31. A pregnancy study in the Philippines randomly select 33 communities from the metropolitan area, then interviews all available pregnant women in these communities. Okay, so we know we're doing a pregnancy study. We have, they randomly selected 33 communities, and then they interviewed all the pregnant women within these communities. So with this one, it is cluster sampling because each community is considered a cluster, and every pregnant woman in a selected community was surveyed. So this one is number 31, and it is cluster sampling. So you can think of the communities as clusters, and then within each clustered, they took out only the pregnant women. Okay, so that would be cluster sampling. And then let's look at number 33. It says 25 students are randomly selected from each grade level at a high school, and surveyed about their study habits. So 25 students are randomly selected from each grade at a high school and surveyed about their study habits. Well, this would be stratified sampling because the 25 students are randomly selected from each grade. So this right here is stratified. One second. Alright, so this is going to conclude the video for Chapter 1. Please let me know if you have any questions.